Today we continue on with Manjushri, and it's difficult to talk about Manjushri in a way of saying a biography, let's say, of a bodhisattva. Wenchupusa means many different things from different schools of Mahayana. We will concentrate most on the Chan Buddha's depiction of Manjushri today. But we have different concepts of what Manjushri stands for. The most common understanding of Manjushri is that he is a Mahasattva. A Mahasattva is a bodhisattva that is capable of enlightenment, but holds off entering into enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings. Before this time, others are considered bodhisattvas that are aspiring towards that goal. The big four Mahasattvas in Chan Buddhism is Chi Gong, Samantabhadra, Wenchupusa, and Avalokitesvara. These bodhisattvas represent the ideal of the Buddhist practice, from the compassion to wisdom to the activity of a bodhisattva. But Manjushri goes beyond even this. There is a term called Adi Buddha.
Right.
The term, the Adi, is the original or the first. Sometimes in English it's referred to as the primordial Buddha. Even that Manjushri was a Buddha that instructed Shakyamuni. So Manjushri takes on a different dimension when we consider this as a possibility. So we have to look at and say, just who is this Manjushri? So Manjushri takes on the roles that are necessary in order to fulfill the vows and carry out Buddha Dharma. In some roles, he is the instructor. In others, he is the student or a listener. In some roles, he is an assistant to a Buddha, Amitabha Buddha. In the Vilamakritti Sutra, he is the wise one, but yet serving as secondary to Vilamakritti himself. These different roles puzzled me for quite a long time. If Wenchupusa had such an elevated status, why does he take a second role to Vilamakritti in the sutra? What is the message? If we had a play and asked all the great actors in the world to participate in this play, it would be a great play, wouldn't it? And if they were all portraying different wise men, we would listen to them carefully and believe them because they're such great actors. It is the same in the sutras. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are portrayed in various roles and capacities in order for the instruction of sentient beings. There is a part in the Vilamakritti Sutra in which they were discussing the nature of emptiness. Finally, Manjushri said it cannot be talked about. And when they asked Vilamakriti, he remained silent. Now, if you think that Manjushri didn't know that, then you would be underestimating the wisdom of Manjushri, especially if you think that he would be an Adi Buddha. You would think he would know that. I remember a discussion I had at the Dharma Drum retreat, the Chan Meditation Hall in Jinsan that I had with Guo Chi. And it was the first time I met Guo Chi. The other monks referred to him as the Mongolian doctor. If you ever met Guo Chi Fashe, you would know that he has a unique way of making you feel better. He hits you with a rubber strap. So sometimes later on, I would see people and they'd have red marks all over their arms or their legs. And I would say, oh, you were introduced to Guo Chi Fashe. And they go, yes, yes. Of course, later I had the introduction of his medical treatment too. So, pap, pap, pap. And he said, do you feel better? And I said, I felt better when you stopped. But in any case, Guo Chi Fashe, we were in an office by the Chan Hall, and there was a group of university students that were a lot of young students. I was being introduced to them, and I heard this voice, and it said, Gilbert, Gilbert. And it was Guo Chi Fashe who was going to ask me a question. He said, they say that you are enlightened. Are you enlightened? And I said, this is a dream, asking a dream about a dream. And we continued on for a while with this kind of a Chan language discussion. Finally, Guo Chi Fashe said to the group of students there, please pay attention. He's talking for your benefit. The students at that point had been confused as to what they were hearing, but they were interested. But Guo Chi Fashe emphasized that this whole play between him and I was for their benefit. The Buddhas and Wenchupusa, they represent appearance bodies. They appear in the world for our benefit. This is the Nirmanakaya. If you remember, there is a Trikaya, 3 bodies. And one is Sambhokaya, which is, you could call a reward body. It is an appearance within the Dharmakaya, which is the true nature of all things. And in the Nirmanakaya is how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas manifest in this world. They can take on whatever appearance that is necessary to either educate or test practitioners. If someone was very proud of their practice and say they have patience, a bodhisattva could appear in a very aggravating role to test that patience. Or if you feel you have a certain level, a bodhisattva could appear maybe to cut you down a little bit to have you reevaluate your level. In the sutra, the teaching on the indivisible nature of the realm of phenomena, the Buddha had asked Manjushri to teach a group of Sangha members about the indivisible nature of the realm of phenomena. Manjushri said, how can I do that? How could I possibly teach about the indivisible realm of the nature of phenomena simply because it's indivisible? And the Buddha said to him, go ahead, try anyway. And Manjushri said, okay, I'm going to do that. But remember, they're going to get afraid. They're going to have fear. And so he taught about how nothing has any separate existence. Nothing is real, including that there is no enlightenment. Hearing this, the monks were astounded and concerned. So they said to Manjushri, what are you talking about? If nothing exists in this way, why did I shave my head and wear these same robes every day? I could have just been a householder and not had to endure such sacrifices. This is all fake, a sham. They left because it was their arrogance and their pride that they had achieved something that they had not. The Buddha, he knew this. I shouldn't point to my head because I should say the Buddha knew this. So Manjushri, he knew this too. They were acting out of play. They were using expedient means upon which to educate these arrogant monks. But there were very critical lessons that were being presented in the sutra. First, that there's no attainment. Next, the Dharmakaya is indivisible. Everything is contained in the Dharmakaya. This is why it is necessary to have this right view of the one mind, ekayana. When we talk about one mind, perhaps that's a misnomer. It should be just mind. It is where the one returns to. Even the Buddha mind returns to mind. The Sambhogakaya is a reward body. It's still an appearance. The Nirmanakaya, the appearance body, is just an appearance. They reflect the true nature of all things, which is thusness. It is why it cannot be truly talked about. But yet, if it was that way, that there would be no Vilamakritti Sutra or the sutra about the indivisibility of the nature of phenomena. It is the expedient means of mind to make these appearances for the transformation of the sentient beings. This transformation is not enlightenment. The transformation is simply awakening from the dream that this corporal body is real. From awakening from the idea that this body can transcend to a higher level. It is why Matsu twisted Baizong's nose at the pond when he asked him, where did the ducks go? When Baizong pointed the direction at where the ducks were going, Matsu twisted his nose.
Oh.
Indeed, where would the ducks go? Only to the sentient being would one think that the ducks have left. To mind, it has never left mind. These are important principles which are acted out by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in these sutras. And when we read these sutras, we should be very mindful of the roles that each is playing in respect to what is being presented. The information is presented for our benefit. The cast of characters change, but they each stand for some role. So we understand that, and they're very, very good at what they do in presenting the Dharma. Now, did all of these things really happen? Were they part of an imagination of some ancient writer? We don't necessarily have to look at it in this way. If we're a historian, we have to look for what's called historicity, proof that something happened and they actually have something. Perhaps a stupa that was written and said, here lies so-and-so. Paintings, written references to an actual person. It is said that Manjushri resides in Wutai Mountains in China. But we know from sutras that Manjushri doesn't dwell anywhere but mind. Does this diminish the effectiveness or the credibility of the Dharma? To me, it doesn't. To others, perhaps. The difference is that I have faith of what I'm reading, and through that study and experiences, I understand the purpose of the sutras. To me, in these sutras, Wenchupusa is appearing, Nirmanakaya. How so? By simply using your heart to practice. You read with a sincerity, to read beyond the words. Now, I read many scholarly articles, and they can talk about the historicity of whether something happened, or the philosophical, or whatever terms that they use to describe their studies. But they can only tell you when and how it was written, but not why. Shifu, he used to say that the doctors and scientists can tell you how you were born to your parents. Actually, you don't have to be a doctor to figure this out. But Shifu said, they cannot tell you why you were born to your parents. When we have faith to look beyond the words, then we begin to see the true face of Manjushri. He is always pointing to the Dharmakaya. He uses the expedient means of appearing in sutras, maybe appearing in front of you, who knows? But he's always directing you to the Dharmakaya. So if we really want to know about Manjushri, we don't need to know when he was born, what school he attended, or anything. We need to understand the heart. In the early sutras, the Mahayana sutras, he was not mentioned regularly. But in the Prajnaparamita sutras, the Lotus and Avatamsaka Sutra, as being important sutras, he is mentioned quite a bit. And he often takes the role of distinguishing between the Theravadan practice of everything is real to the Prajnaparamita practice of everything is fundamentally empty. But in the later sutras, the Mahayana and Tathagata Garbha sutras, Manjushri takes on an even deeper role. His exchanges go to the Buddha nature, the Dharmakaya. And this is critical because this is what drives karuna, this unbridled compassion towards sentient beings. Something very interesting. I think Eon's here, and I think he was on my mind work forum. He was mentioning some things about the flaming sword of Manjushri. See, the sword has a flame. And the sword itself, what in fact is it cutting? What do you think it cuts? Anybody? Come on. I know if you weren't on with everybody else, you would be having some opinion.
Ignorance?
Cutting
No.
ignorance? Okay, anybody else? Vexation?
Vexation. Sarah.
I'm sorry?
Sarah.
Oh, samsara. Oh, all right. Anything else? I'm glad you're sitting down. I had this dialogue with Eon earlier and saying, what does Manjushri's sword cut? This is from the Zen teachings of Huang Po. This is good stuff, so pay attention. I'm talking to you. What is the meaning of the passage? Manjushri stood before Gautama with a drawn sword. And I'm going to edit what his response is. It says that on account of their knowledge of previous karma, they sought the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, and nirvana objectively. Essentially, what it's saying is that they're looking for these things. And so objectively, meaning that there's a duality there. It was for this reason that Manjushri took up the sword of Bodhi and used it to destroy the concept of the tangible Buddha. He used the sword to cut the Buddha himself. Isn't this just the way? Grasping. He didn't cut discrimination. He cut the Buddha. We have the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Only one is real. The other two are transitory. You cannot know the Buddha from its 32 marks. The Dharma can only take us so far in samsara. In actuality, it's a secondary practice. The Buddha, without calling it the Buddha, without calling it mine, like Vilamakriti, that's it. So only this is the thusness of things. Our concepts of good and bad, morality, immorality, those are still concepts. Manjushri stands for the lack of duality. Why is this sword flaming? It's not just a sword, it's a flaming sword. Anybody have an idea? This would be triple points if you get it. The Adi Buddha in the ancient sutras appears as a flame. When we see the pictures, we should say, look, there's a clue. Can you cut a flame? Part the ocean? We use these analogies to show that this is the fundamental, the primordial mind. Here is Manjushri, depicted as a young 15, 16-year-old boy. A name meaning gentle glory. He has another name that means gentle voice. But Manjushri really stands for all time periods. He stands for all appearances. There is a sutra of the dwelling place of Mañjuśrī, and he's asked, where does he appear? Or I should say, where does he dwell? And he goes on to explain that he appears everywhere, but yet nowhere. This is the freedom of the Buddha mind. There are no boundaries to it, no descriptions of it, but it confirms the interdependence of all appearances. Nothing appears out of place. It appears due to causes and conditions. And yet, it doesn't appear.
不过呢，
How does that even make any sense? Very interesting. If you read Master Ling Chi's discourse for the beginners of Chan practitioners, he has some interesting things to say in there. And he talks about all sorts of different karmas that can befall us. Yet he says, I have searched for 12 years for this thing called karma and haven't found anything the size of a mustard seed that could be called karma. This is right view.
这就是正见。
Now, if somebody took him out of context, they could say, oh, Ling Chi says karma doesn't exist. This is outer path. Please don't ever do this unless you truly understand. Because the karma might be great or not great, depending on how one, how mind is. So you take your chances. So today we didn't get to the sutra I wanted to talk about, but that might come next week if I run out of things to say, which doesn't appear to be the case these days. But we did explore a lot about the heart of Manjushri. My role is not to tell you what you already know. My role is to expand your horizons with respect to Buddha Dharma, to stimulate practice and increase your faith, and to present the things that you didn't know. This is what is a well-known advisor.
那所谓的善知识就应该是这样。
If I'm just simply here reciting things, committing things to memory, and spouting them off, it's no better than just giving you a list. The role of a well-known advisor is to present material that will assist a person in the realization of the true nature. This requires you to have right view, how mind works, proper concentration, and the contemplation of mind without thinking. It is said that we should not even contemplate, but this means a different type of contemplation, a contemplation of just sitting and thinking. But without thinking, the mind is just resting. What more do you want? It's all there just for you to practice. Now, tomorrow night in my regular Monday night class, I will talk about this in more detail about what mind work is and right view. So this is kind of a teaser for tomorrow. So if you're interested, please tune in. And I will talk about that in more detail of what mind work is. Does not mean that we don't use the practice of all the different things that we practice. But it means that it has to be directed in the proper way. And before we open it up to questions, and you can start working on your questions, I would like to thank John Wu, the interpreter, that made my job so easy today. Okay, we'll open it up to questions. You should have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Oh, Wesley, unmute him. There he goes. Go ahead. Amito.
So I guess this was a really good talk and exactly kind of what I needed in my practice. So for a little background, my practice is very much rooted in the Pure Land tradition, reciting Namo Amitofo and aspiring to be born in the Pure Land to fulfill the Bodhisattva path. However, when looking at the sutra that we're going to be discussing next week, the Manjushri Prajna Paramita Sutra, he talks about the means to sort of access this realization is through what he calls a single action samadhi. And he says to do this, one takes a Buddha and holds to his name. And I realize this is my practice that I've been doing for years now, and yet that sort of, I don't understand how this is. It's sort of, I don't know, it doesn't click. Something seems like it's missing.
Okay.
I was wondering if you had any advice on that.
Master Sheng Yen did recitation of the Buddha's name. What was missing from your practice is what hopefully you got a taste of today. That is the right view.
Now,
single action samadhi means to be in the present moment. Shifu used to always say the Buddha is in the present moment. Single action samadhi is simply to accord with whatever is appearing in that moment and to harmonize with it. If you're eating, you just eat. When you finish eating, you wash your bowl. Shifu used to always say that in the present moment, one always rests. Now, before I was teaching this class, I was preparing for it. I was resting from sleeping. After preparing for the class, I began to lecture, and I'm resting from preparing. Later, I will go downstairs and rest from the lecture and have some breakfast. But the mind does not move. Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo. Where is the movement in that? There's no movement. This is single action samadhi. So you just keep this Buddha presence in mind in the present moment. So we practice in the present moment. If you practice in this way, you will not be far from it. Just this mind that you're using right now to listen, it's the Buddha mind. Where else do you think you would find it? If you practice this way, your practice will improve dramatically. It's not just simply moving the beads around. It's a circle where what would you accomplish?
No.
Returning the mind to mind, that is what is important. So continue, you'll do very well.
Thank you. Amitofo.
Okay. Shayan Ma.
I like your teaching. I speak Chinese. And
okay. So my question is that for the practice, it is emphasized the concept of the idea of suffering, emptiness, and no self. However, on the other side, some sutras will focus on saying that the permanence and the joy and the self and the pureness. So I'm kind of confused here as to how I should practice.
It is a very good question. there is a confusion in your understanding of the sutra. In our practice, we can go through different stages, including Dharma joy. The idea of the self is often misunderstood. We equate the self with this body, but it is not this self that it's referring to. It is the self-nature of mind. In the self-nature of mind, everything returns to upika, which means equanimity. This is a non-duality of mind. So it isn't necessarily inconsistent. It is the interpretation because of the misunderstanding of the use of self. Actually, Samantabhadra's 4 great vows go, I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings of self-nature. And the other 3 also end in self-nature. This truly represents the Tathagata. It's difficult for us to understand that, so they cut that part out. I understand your question because as a beginner, I had the same kind of a question. And especially when I heard of self-nature, I went, huh? This mind that you're using is the self-nature of mind. But just like the flame, it cannot be cut, and you call your mind something and my mind something. We don't call it anything. Manjushri just said, thusly, we cannot talk about it. Mañjuśrī kept his lips sealed, because how could this red meatball try to describe mind? What we do is use mind with right view. Then everything will fit together. Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
And I understand and accept what you say, but for me, the difficult part is how I could put it into actual practice. Say, for example, according to the Madhyamika philosophy, it says that it's either non-existence and non-empty. But to me, non-existence equals empty, and non-empty equals existence. So how would I ever get to reconciled in between all this?
It's very interesting because in the first lecture, I answered that question in terms of Manjushri finding himself between 2 iron mountains, existence and non-existence. It is why Nagarjuna did not answer the question. He kept his lips sealed. Does it exist or not exist? He did not respond, not because he did not know or didn't want to know, but in fact, he was responding. My most senior student, when he was young, and I guess I was young too, he asked me the same question. And the only thing I could think of to answer him was, ask the lamppost. Something very interesting happened. It rang true like a giant Dharma bell. He's been a student, a friend, and companion of mine since. Have faith, one day it will come together. Until then, keep asking questions, please. I tell my students that sometimes they're afraid to ask questions because they're afraid to show their level. But by not asking questions, they are showing their level. So to all of you, please ask questions. Next one, Cynthia.
I prefer to ask a question, a very simple question in Mandarin Chinese.
Okay, Gilbert, my question is that you talked about resting, right? And later on, you encourage us to keep asking questions. So in keep asking questions, that means that we are curious about something, right? So we are curious about the practice, we are curious about the Dharma. And then my question is, in between the resting you mentioned and the curiosity you mentioned, Is there any contradiction in between?
Not really, because all we do is we're engaged in a function. So right now, I'm resting from the other question to respond to you. So in responding to you, I'm resting from listening to your question. There's no contradiction. We follow function. This is what Wesley was talking about, single-minded samadhi. So as long as we follow single-minded samadhi and keep our minds in the present moment and harmonious to the environment around us, then we're resting. This is what Master Sheng Yen once taught at a retreat. It really had a great impact on me, but it's not an intellectual pointer. It's a pointing to the practice. Right view points to the practice. If you try this in resting, you'll be very surprised. It will improve your day immediately. Instead of, oh, I'm washing these dishes, I have to wash these dishes. Oh, it's so dirty, my hands are cracking. Instead, let me get the plate clean. If my hands are cracking, next time I'll wear gloves. Okay, let me talk. Ask questions.
There's a question. Sorry, Gilbert. There's a question from the chat room.
Yes.
Can I read it? So it's from Chris. He says, I'm sorry that it is rather inconvenient to talk, but I do have a question for Gilbert. Is it bad to be curious as to where one has reached on the Buddhi road? Does it necessarily mean that one is having a discriminatory view? If so, how does one know where they are and where to go on?
This is a very good question. I think that this is where many of us fail. Whenever I lecture, it's very rare that I will talk about levels of practice, simply because it's possible that one can go from the lowest level to the highest level in a snap of fingers. So we don't necessarily have to climb a ladder. I subscribe to Hui Ning, what's called subitism or sudden enlightenment as a possibility. This means if the karmic conditions are correct and one is sincere in their practice, they can obtain a realization in an instant. This is not complete enlightenment. This is just a realization of the self-nature of mind. But in the meantime, I suggest that you follow Shifu's instructions. He said that we should be climbing up a mountain that has fog all over it. With each step, we know we're heading towards the top. Because we cannot see the top, we only have to have faith that as long as we climb up, we will get there. We don't pay any attention to when we will get there. We know we will get there because we have the faith that climbing up, that ultimately we will reach the top. But if we try to put an eye towards the goal, we only have one eye to the practice. Shifu, he said that it's better to have both eyes on the practice. It would be very burdensome to carry around that you are at the seventh level of being a Puba, looking down at all the other ones that have not reached that level. But you'll be looking behind you to see if anyone's catching up, or looking up to see the 8th level of Puba, and when will you get there? To the interpreter, I don't know how you interpret Puba. Puba is a nonsensical word or nonsensical title. See, I didn't hear Puba, that's why it was late. But it's important because whatever it is, whatever level it is, it's not important. Okay, I think that answers that. Okay, Thomas, wave so we know you're moving. All right, okay. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm mute again. Yeah, okay. Let me just make my question short. Well, my question is really that during meditation, I know the first part is really to quiet the mind, whatever method, breathing or any method that we use to quiet down the mind. But the second part, they always talk about contemplation. And I think that's the part that I don't really understand. The hurdles that I have is that what is contemplation? Because I'm contemplating using a stray thoughts. It's a thought, it's not a mind. So what is real contemplation here? And when I try to contemplate, I don't seem to get the way. I am just using thoughts, and I don't know what is the right way to do it.
Tomorrow in my Mind Work Forum, I'm actually going to talk about that in detail.
Okay, now
But in any case, the contemplation that I'm talking about is different from what people think of contemplation. It's not like the one of the artist Rodin, who has a statue of the thinker. I didn't see that. It is the practice of no thought. You're not there sitting contemplating your practice or your problems or your goals. Just sitting. You don't have to say, this is mine. Whatever happens when you don't think, thoughts will still arise in mind. That's by the nature of it. It's okay, let them go. You are not a daydreamer. That would be like you sitting in a green field looking up at the sky at the clouds and saying, that one looks like a bear, that one looks like a sheep, a rabbit. They're always changing anyway. What are you trying to grasp? So you just leave it alone. Now try contemplating in this way. Okay. Try that and then come back and see if that works.